Okay. Clap one on three. One, two, three. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of True Crime and Cocktails. We're so glad that you're here. As always, I am your host, Lauren Ash, and as always, I am joined by my co-hostess with the mostess, Christy Oxborrow. How you feeling?
Feeling great.
Beauty.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I also realize I'm springing this on you, so you may
Okay.
not have a specific answer.
All right.
But I've realized that the day this releases
Okay.
is the birthday
Mm-hmm.
of Mr. Brendan Fraser.
Oh, okay.
And so I was just going to ask, do you have a favorite role?
Uh, I love that the first thing that came to mind was Encino Man.
Oh my God. Classic.
Yeah,
He's so good in that.
he's very charming.
He is.
Yeah.
Even when he's all like gross and covered in mud and you're like, I don't want, you're still charmed.
Yeah.
Look, my immediate, because I didn't IMDb this in advance like a prepared podcaster would. My immediate thought is Airheads.
Oh, another great one.
Because I'm like, him in that movie? Him in that movie? I
The
mean,
whole time?
yeah. I mean, the obvious other answer is The Mummy,
Of course.
which was, I believe, a sexual awakening for everyone on every level of throughout that movie. It's
Yeah.
a lot of beauty going on in that
Yes.
movie. Um, But yeah, Encino Man, classic.
Yeah. I feel like I've only seen it once, but it's stuck
No
with
kidding.
me. It's stuck
Yeah,
with me for some reason.
I watched it a lot in my youth, and then I watched it anytime it was on TBS.
Mm.
And then I watched it again. I think I watched it in the pandemic when I went through what I called my isolation classics. And then I think I've seen it again since then, like within the last year.
Oh,
It holds up. Pauly Shore in that movie he knocks it out of the park. He got a lot of
listen,
shit for his acting, but I thought he was a delight.
look, you know, not everyone has to be everything, you know?
Yeah. Oh, Pauly Shore in Son-in-Law, which also still holds up, FYI. It's fantastic. I,
Oh,
I
listen,
mean, he did everything I wanted him to do.
I'm just quickly going through his IMDb.
Of course.
And I mean, listen, my God, what a career.
Oh, 100%.
What a career. But the other one that stood out to me, hold on, where is it? I love that I saw it, thought, bring that one up, and
Yeah,
it immediately left my brain.
I get that.
Um, where did it go? Blast from the Past.
Oh, sure.
I liked that one also.
With Alicia Silverstone.
Was it?
Did you know that we've been saying her name wrong all these years?
It's not Alicia.
Apparently not.
It's Alicia.
According to the lady herself, people have been
Well,
saying it wrong and she's just accepted it
and
and moved
listen,
on.
we have to trust anything that comes out of her mouth, even if it's the food that she's pre-chewed for her children.
Yeah, yeah,
Teach
yeah,
their own, man. Teach their own.
of course. But yeah, I couldn't believe that not only have we been pronouncing it wrong, but that she's just been like, meh,
Yeah.
you do you. But yeah, Alicia, I believe, is I mean, again,
Alicia.
this is a video I watched so long ago that now I'm second guessing myself. I shouldn't be because
No,
I know I'm right.
I'm sure you are. I'm certain of it.
Oh
I'm
God,
certain of it.
I can recite Clueless like nobody's business. You know what I mean? That was one of my cinema loves.
I love that movie. I love it.
It's a classic. Look, is it weird her having the hots for her ex stepbrother? Yeah, but he's so charming.
And they're not blood related.
They're not blood related.
And I don't feel like I think they also made it clear that like they didn't live together for very long.
I don't even know they live together at all.
They might not have. I feel like they were trying to make it as like palatable as possible for her to be in love with her stepbrother.
Well, and also, who's not gonna be in love with Josh?
Well, I mean, it's Paul Rudd in his prime, and then I also give the caveat: isn't Paul Rudd always in his prime?
I need to believe he is. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like, I just think I'll say it. I feel like he came on the scene, like everybody suddenly paid attention in Clueless.
of course.
And then he hasn't left the scene since, and I couldn't be happier.
We're all better for it.
We are. We are. Oh.
Yeah, he's a classic human, classic actor.
Yeah.
Again, another what a career. I know Brendan Fraser had that break of time and then
Sure.
had his what do we call it? Resurgence? We call it that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever see Mrs. Winterbourne?
I don't know.
That was a classic, I want to say mid 90s with Ricky Lake.
I was gonna say, was that Ricky Lake?
Brendan Fraser played twins.
Oh my
I have
word.
not seen this movie in so long, so I could be forgetting a lot of details, but she is very pregnant and she's on a train at the same time that one of the Brendan Fraser twins is on a train. There's an accident that Brendan Fraser dies. This is not a
Oh,
spoiler. This is the whole point of this movie. Um, and his family get confused and think that Ricky Lake is the woman that the brother was bringing home to meet them. But it turns out because there was something about she like was sitting in the wrong seat or something got mixed up. And so the family pick her up and they think she's pregnant with his baby. And there's probably love with the other Brendan Fraser. I don't know. The point is, I remember being very charmed by it.
of course.
This was a reason why I don't do movie trailers. I mean, I assume they'd give me a better heads up than you saw that movie 20 to 30 years ago. You tell the people what it's about.
I like the idea that you would be cutting together movie trailers now for movies that are like 30 years old, and you'd still
Yeah.
have trouble not putting too much detail in them. It's like, why are we having her
Yeah.
do this job? She's not great at it. But who else is going to make these movie trailers for 30-year-old films?
She literally volunteered to do this.
It's an unpaid position.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Oh, I would love it. I would absolutely love it. I mean, again, it's my dream to be one of the people. They get the main cast. I don't know why I always want to be the person. It's impossible. I want to be one of the people on a TV show that's like previously on this show.
you just want to say that line?
Yeah. And I know it's always one of the actors
It
from
doesn't
that
have to be.
show. But because I always used to think it was previously beat on whatever. But I realized, no, you gotta speed that shit up, cut the beat. Like previously on Grey's Anatomy. I don't know why Grey's Anatomy was the choice.
I think we both know.
Lost it.
I
And it's
by the
early.
look, if I, God willing, if I ever get
Yeah.
my own show and they want us to do a previously on, the job is yours. Like it's that
Oh,
easy.
it would
I
it would be a dream.
happy
I
to.
I don't know why that is my dream, but it is a dream that I have because there's just something about the previously that I mean, I'd do a million takes and I'd be like, "No, something's not right." And they're like,
What
"The
I love
fourth
is
one
the
was
idea
fine."
that I bring you in to do this job and then they're like, she's a perfectionist. We've been in here for 6 hours trying to get this one line.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
coming out of pocket for this.
Yeah. And then they're gonna be like, and for some reason she wants to cut like a 90s trailer from the show. I don't understand. She doesn't even really seem to know what the show's about. Has she seen the show? She has. She's just forgotten. This is just the magic in how I would work.
She also is playing a lot with the duration of the pause after previously. And we keep telling her that we can just cut it to make it as short or as long as we need, but she wants a take that's
Yeah.
not manipulated.
Yeah.
This is how you
This
get a
is it.
rep. You know what I mean? A reputation.
Oh yeah. Someone's gonna get called a diva more than once.
Listen, That term might get thrown around,
It
and
might.
they should be so lucky.
It
They
might.
should be so lucky. Now, very quickly, um, you mentioned the identical twins in Mrs. Winterbourne,
Yes.
which triggered a thought in my mind. Have you heard about these two baseball players? They're both minor league baseball players. Have you heard about
Oh,
this?
the two Bradys.
They have the exact same first and last name. They are the
Yeah.
same height. They both have ginger beards, and they're not related.
Yeah, I think they both have glasses,
Oh, they're yeah.
and they're
Here, well,
both the
listen,
same
I'll show
position
you a
and
photo
everything.
here for the people on YouTube.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
again, the same first and last name. And look, I know that I always do this and I always promise that I'm not going to do it. But like this to me, I'm seeing more proof that there's a glitch in the timeline.
oh, that like, what are the odds of that?
What are the odds of that? That they're both the exact same height, look almost identical, have the exact same first and last name. They do the same thing for a living. This to me, I'm like, this is proof. Something got messed up.
Sure.
Something got messed up in the matrix, the timeline, whatever you want to call it. Somebody slid and they weren't supposed to. Like, there's something going on here.
Sure. I was desperately racking my brain. I'm like, as soon as you said slid, I'm like, how can I use this? They're baseball pitchers. Come up with a line as to how something slid. And I was like, hopefully they threw it home. Like
Oh,
I was like, what's the line I'm gonna say? Look, I'll say like the first name I would say is fairly popular as far as a name goes, but their last name is not popular. I don't,
no.
they're not like well known. So it's like, what are the odds of that?
And apparently it became a thing because one of them went into a doctor's office for a surgery and they were like, "You were just here." And he was like, "No, I wasn't." And they were like, "Yeah, your name is Brady Feigl and you're a baseball player. And we just did this specific surgery." He's like, "Well, that's the surgery that I need, but I haven't been here before."
And they need the same surgery.
Yeah, it's again, that to me is proof something's up.
Oh,
Something's up.
there's something weird about that, but that's also terrifying to be like, we already did that surgery. And it's like, you're going to need to double check that file.
Well, again, when it's the same first and last name, they have the same job and they look alike.
Yeah.
What a mind fuck.
Especially if they're like anywhere in the same area.
Right.
That is weird.
It's really weird. And listen, I won't get into it. I won't belabor it. I promise I won't get into quantum physics this week. But I did send Christy a video the other day of Tom DeLonge of Blink 182 fame, who we
Sure.
all know is very invested in aliens.
Of
And he
course.
was talking about how the UFOs that are being seen, there is the theory that apparently, now I haven't deep dived this, but he's saying there's proof now that it isn't that those are coming from outer space. It's that they're coming from another timeline. And I'm like, here we go. Buckle me in. Let me get on that side of TikTok. Let's go.
Oh, yeah, look, I've never, I said it to you then, I say it to you now. I've never said I'm not buying this other timeline thing because there are just too many things that happen. Like when we all remember Fruit of the Loom used to have a little cornucopia with the fruit in it. And then Fruit of the Loom is like, we've never had that as our logo. Then I'm like, well, what fucking timeline was that in that we're remembering it from? Because
I
there are
do
too many things like that that,
the Mandela effect. You brought this
yeah,
up to me in that text, and I didn't have a chance at the time to get into it deeper with you. I could not have been more excited. Um, but I really think that you could be onto something there. That it's like
right?
if every timeline is existing at the same time, which we've talked about before, and I promise I won't belabor it. Why do I even give the caveats anymore? Everybody knows I'm gonna fucking nerd out about this.
They're
Anyway,
here for it.
it is an interesting way to explain that phenomenon, right? Because I remember the cornucopia
Right?
vividly. Yes. There's so many of those Mandela effect things that it's like I genuinely remember it that way,
Yep.
as do so many people. And it is an interesting thing to think about that it's like, is it possible that but then the question becomes, have millions of people slid? Like, how many of us are sliding between timelines at any given moment? And how many of us were in that exact one and then ended up in this exact one? How did Brady Feigl and Brady Feigl both end up here?
Oh, is one of the Brady Feigls the Brady Feigl from another timeline?
This is what I'm saying.
And somehow one of them was supposed to shift to the other timeline, and somehow he didn't. And so this timeline ended up with the two Brady Feigls.
Is there another timeline where there's two me's or two you's?
Oh, I think the universe would implode. I don't think they can handle. I don't think they can handle this. Can you imagine the two of you and the two of me are like, you know what? The four of us should do a show together. Like, no one would have a clue who was talking ever.
It would be absolute chaos, a cacophony of sound.
Yes.
Yeah, four voices. Be like,
Yeah.
hey, it's me, Lauren Ash, and it's me, Lauren Ash, and it's me, Christy Oxborrow, and it's me, Christy Oxborrow. Like, it would be, yeah, good luck.
And the only way you would know it was me is every once in a while I'd just go previously on something, you know what I mean? Just to remind people.
How do we know that the
Which
other
one?
you doesn't have that same dream?
I have to believe there's going to be something that would tell us apart, not visually, but there's something. Like, does this other Christy not drink Slurpees?
Whoa.
Does this other Christy think Paul Rudd is just okay? Like, I'm trying to think of things that people would be like, well, obviously, like, does this other Christy, and I don't even want to say it because it turns my stomach. Does this other Christy not even like hockey? And that's where I'm at with that. Yeah.
These are all great questions.
I mean, I can't even begin. Like, oh my God, worse. What if I meet me from another timeline and she's like, I love hockey. And I'm like, that's so cool. Who's your team? And she's like, I don't know, like Toronto or something. And I'd be like, what? Like, there are so many. I don't know why I had to give it to Toronto there. There are teams that would hurt me more.
Yeah.
Just based on long-standing team grudges.
What about this?
Yeah.
I love that we've seen this through our own lens, where we're like, we would all get along and have a 4-person podcast. What if the other Lauren Ash and Christy Oxborrow had a rival podcast?
Oh. Like, we're just assuming they're also best friends, right? Because we're assuming there's no timeline where we couldn't be best friends.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that feels impossible.
We just assume. But, like, what if they hate us?
Right.
What if they're like, oh, a bit loud, not my taste? And it's like, what?
A bit loud. Something that's been said about us many times.
Our entire lives.
Our entire lives.
Long before we got microphones.
If you thought we were loud before, world, guess what? Now we're amplified.
Yeah.
Family members have said it. Strangers have said it. People on the street have said it. Yeah.
Many family members have left the room because they don't want to be in the same room as us because it gets to a different volume.
Boisterous.
Yeah. Yes.
I'll say it. Spirited.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
100%. I mean, the amount of times, I mean, and I know that people are like, oh my God, I would love it. But like, imagine this. And like the conversation of like, oh my God, what if there's another timeline? And imagine that. And it goes for hours.
Right.
And you're just like, I'm so tired. How are they not tired? Somehow they've been snacking the whole time. So we never tire.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
No. And you know who else doesn't? Our doppelgangers.
I have to believe that. And immediately I'm like, Like, how similar are we? Like, is she married? Is she married to a similar person? I I have so many questions.
Yeah.
Does
We
she have
should
a
be
degree? Does she have a dream of opening a TV show that she's not on? Like, there are just so many questions that I have.
I feel like, you know, I feel like we should be studying the Bradys. You know what I mean? Like we should be finding
Yes.
out all of these details. And you know what I'm
Yes.
saying? If we aren't studying them for some reason,
We
now
should
I'm
be.
getting into government conspiracy territory because what don't they want us to know? You know what I'm saying?
I want to go so far as to be like, I want to go through painstakingly so through things that they love and that they hate.
Yeah,
What's your go-to McDonald's order? Is it the same as his go-to McDonald's order?
right.
What do you think of this show? Do you like this program? What's your favorite song of all time? What band have you seen the most? Like, I have a million questions, and I'm gonna need them both to answer.
Yeah,
And I'm gonna need that on film,
yeah.
and I'm gonna need them run side by side so that I can see if they have any of the same, like, do they pause at the same moment? Do they, like, oh, if they aren't being studied yet, I like to be on the team.
Well, and again, if they aren't being studied, there's a reason. There's a reason.
Sure. To be clear, I don't mean like alien studied. You know what I mean? I don't mean
Mhm.
like lock them in a thing and then we watch them from behind glass. I'm not meaning that. I'm just meaning like they voluntarily come in and sit and answer all my ridiculous questions.
Right.
Do you remember a cornucopia? Like, you know, and then if one of them says yes and one of them says no, that's the moment I'm going to be like, there it is.
Mhm.
Well, I'm going to be
Mhm.
convinced I'm on to something and at some point yell out, "I've blown this whole thing wide open." There's nothing to blow open. Like, I don't know, but I'm gonna want to make a dramatic statement.
How do you know there isn't anything to blow open?
Look, I didn't want to say it because it feels rude to have too many dreams in one episode, but it's a dream to blow something wide open.
You know, I was gonna say this earlier and I stopped
Yeah.
myself. But what my instinct when you were talking about this dream earlier, my instinct was to say, I just feel like you have so many dreams and how beautiful.
I love that I thought you were gonna say aim higher.
No.
Uh, but but you're right. I do have a lot of things that I'm like, oh, that would be a dream. And I have a lot of things that I enjoy. And
Huh,
while that is beautiful, I've said for years I'd like to dial it back because as a collector, it gets a tad overwhelming.
sure.
Where it's like I have so many things that I like. It's hard to narrow it down.
Mhm.
If one were to try and like declutter their home,
Mhm.
it's hard to know where the line is.
I get that.
Yeah. Oh,
I love that this just went to something that never happens on this show, a
yeah.
thoughtful pause. Never happens. We never have a thoughtful pause. This is
No.
I think this is our first thoughtful pause ever. And we were both legitimately in it. We
Yeah.
were both like,
Yeah.
"Huh."
Well, you know who thoughtful pauses all the time?
Lauren and Christy too?
100%.
Yeah.
Oh my god, what if we're the 2?
We're not the 2.
There's no way. We're not the ones.
Yeah, come on. Let's get real here. I'm
Look,
sure they're great, and I'm sure their podcast has lots of merit, but it's not got the
sure.
magic that we do. They don't
Ah,
exist.
I
Why am I competing?
I don't know, but I love it. I, I was like, God, could we really be like the second version of us? And I'm like, no, no, because the second version of us wouldn't decide we're gonna put up a Christmas tree in this area behind me. to bring a little Christmas for the December months, and as far as I got was putting the fucking box in the corner.
Well,
That's
what's nice is there's a picture of a Christmas tree on the
there
box,
it
a
is.
very small one. So at least there's that.
Yeah. Yeah. I also was gonna like, I mean, on top of it is the tree star that I was gonna put up so you could so it was like the star was on top of the tree, but I worried it would fall over and break and I would be devastated. So
Of course.
I just needed to, I'll get there eventually. And some people might say, you know what? You're a true crime podcast. Maybe don't Christmasify your workspace. And to that I say, but I'm gonna put true crime and cocktails themed ornaments on it.
Oh, like
Nobody's
this?
telling me not to do it.
No. And why
Well,
did I have our latest ornament in front? This is an audio medium. Why was I like, have it on hand? Have the latest one on hand. Show it
yep,
off to the people who are
yep,
mostly listening and not watching.
yep.
Well, I think part of the reason why is that I couldn't be happier with the size of this year's ornament. I'll say it,
It's
huge.
large.
It's large.
Yeah,
It pops. It really pops, in my opinion.
it does.
Anyway, truecrewmerch.com if you want the 2024 ornament. Um, I will also just say, I don't know at the time of this airing what the status of the Canadian postal strike will be, but
Oh,
what a time to do it. I mean, they're really trying to grip people by the balls doing this in the holiday season.
yeah. Oh, I think they're trying to just really grip Canada Post by the balls and prove how much they're needed. And great. I think that's great. Um, the only the only thing I noticed, I mean, I, of course, head in the sand. I did not know this was happening, and I went to the mail downtown to check our mailbox, and went, God, why is everybody outside with signs? What's happening? And I Googled in the car, and was very like, this is embarrassing. I should have known this. Um, but I did some online shopping, and there were at least 2 sites that were like, "Hey, if you spend this amount, you get free shipping." And I was like, I didn't go out of my way to spend that amount. I was already spending a certain amount. So I was like, "Cool, free shipping." And then I click through and get to the shipping part, and they're like, here's the sitch. We can't offer you free shipping. You're going to have to use somebody." And so
Right.
it was like, which of these things do you want to pay for? And the one I chose was very clearly discounted because there's no way it would have been that cheap to send it through like a FedEx Pure Later sort of
Right.
situation. But to that, I say maybe during this time, take the spend this and get free shipping. Maybe take that little banner off your website. I may not know websites, but I know
Sure.
you can do that. I know that's possible. Just maybe whoop, take that off your website. Again, I wasn't like, "Ooh, I'll spend more and get free shipping." I no. I was already there. But then just to be like, "Great news, free shipping." Psych. Here's the thing. No. You can't have that. And like, oh, the amount of websites now that across the top, it's like either it says it's affected by, like, brace yourselves, it's going to be affected by this strike, or it's like, great news, we found another way of shipping. And like, as it is, I got a message that I have a package being delivered in the next 3 hours. And it's like, it's 10 o'clock at night. Like, calm down. It can come tomorrow. Like, nothing is like, unless it's Christmas Eve. You do not need to deliver things to my home at 10 o'clock at night.
They're taking on the Amazon model to like the next level.
It's going too far. I think the smaller companies, not like the FedExes and all of those, I think the smaller delivery companies are really trying to uh, to make up for what's not there. And I
Right.
think they're learning they're tired. It's a lot. And to
Yeah.
that I say it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, nothing at 10 o'clock again. Go home.
Go home.
See your families. Like, you know what I mean? Be home, be rested. And I know it's not their choice. And to their bosses, I say, let them rest.
Let the people go home.
There is nothing that's getting delivered tonight that I need tonight. Again, if it was Christmas Eve and I was like, maybe, but
Remember the time that we ordered pizza on
yeah,
Christmas? Was it Christmas Eve?
yeah,
And then it took like 4 hours to get there.
it did.
And then there was the joke. What do you think this is? Christmas?
Yeah. I mean, I remember the joke, but I also just remember how long we were all waiting.
I think it's miraculous that there wasn't, because this was a big family Christmas. Like there was a lot of people under one
There were.
roof.
Yeah.
And it's miraculous that more people didn't turn on each other.
That's a good point. I feel like when I think back to it, I mostly just remember the two of us hanging out. So I feel like everybody kind of separated and went to their own individual little spaces.
Well, there
And
was a
then,
kids' table that was just you and I want to remind you that we were not the only kids. So I think we kind of
yeah,
just did our own thing, it is the point.
that is a good point.
That was
Yeah.
the same Christmas. I think I may have talked about this on the show before, but that was the same Christmas where Christy, again, I think the perception of the two of us is that she's the good girl and I'm the baddie. But let me tell you something. She was like, let's snoop and find my presents. And I was horrified. Of course, I got on board, but I was like, I can't believe we're doing this. She's such a badass. And
I
then we
mean,
went, I remember they were in the laundry room. I remember it all vividly because it was exhilarating
I just
and
want,
terrifying.
of course, I just want you to know I have written down I'm the baddie.
You are the baddie. I think that
I
you're
just like the
way
way,
more
yeah,
you lean to being more of like a you know,
sure.
yeah, a
Oh,
baddie.
yeah. Yeah,
In a
look,
good way, but
I
you know,
I I would say overall in the grand scheme of things, I'm such a good girl to like almost painstaking amounts. But I've had moments where I've said fuck the good girl and just done my own thing, but like for the most part, um I am a rule follower by
I think
heart,
I
but
think this
yes.
really speaks to how much of a rule follower I am, that I have a vivid flashback memory of every moment of us finding that
Yeah.
stuffed genie from Aladdin.
Yeah.
Again, it's in there. I see everything.
Now, is it possible psychologist hat
I love it.
that in that moment I was like, "Hey, I gotta pull something so she thinks I'm cool."
Well, here's what's fascinating. I've never thought about it that way. And I guess it doesn't matter because guess what? You succeeded.
I mean, thank God. But that does make it makes sense
Yeah.
because I mean, and my perception of you as even like when we were kids was always like, even even though I think even though there was a moment in time where I lived in the big city compared to
Yes.
you, but I always have always thought of like you're the cool one from the big city and I'm like the nerd that's like from the teeny tiny town. Well, there was a moment in time where I lived in the provincial capital. So that's a chunk of people. That's at least like I don't know, a cool 600K maybe? I don't know. A million? I
Hey,
what's the
you're
population?
you're too cool to know. You know what I mean?
Well, population of Regina. See if that brings me. Holy shit. Wait, what? Wow, I was so far off. It's not even funny. Uh, this is saying 242,000. Right. I thought it was like a million. I believe the entire province is a million. Well, that's
Yeah,
embarrassing. Who knows how many people are in there? I could tell you how many people are in my town, but I can't tell
sure.
you how many are. No, it's fine. It's fine.
Listen, it was definitely bigger than where I was living at the time. So you're right. It also has a big city vibe, like, or it did it felt like it did at the
Yes.
time when we were kids.
Oh, 100%. It felt like the biggest place in the world. And then it's like, oh, baby girl, what you doing? Like that place? I mean, again, I thought it was almost a million people, and there's a million in the entire province. Like that's a horror that I will never let go of, and I will think about as I'm trying to fall asleep in my list of like, in my highlight reel
Hmm.
of like what what I'm the most annoyed with that I've done over the years. I'll think about that. Like there's everyone has their list. This is going to go on it. Me badly uh saying over projecting how many people are in certain cities and in my province. Um I mean there was a time where I I was I had a crush on this boy. I was like 12 and I tried to get in with humor. Shocking, I know. And so I was like, oh, okay, and I thought I made a joke, but it just insulted me. Like it was a whole thing where we were in a band rehearsal. Not a cool band, FYI. They knew. But we were in a band rehearsal, and then it was just me, this boy, and our specific teacher. And the teacher was like, "Which one of you wants to go first?" And I pointed to this boy that I had a crush on, and I said, "Ladies first," because I thought that was so clever. I I was 12, and I think about it 30 years later. I still think about it. I think about the time that I didn't have any clean pants in the 6th grade and I got sent to school in my um, sister's hammer pants style thing. And I was on the playground and a kid like tapped my pants in like a, hey, the bell rang, we should go. And she did a ding ding on my pants and my pants went down and I was up on top of something in my underpant glory as the bell rang and kids were running past me. Yeah, those are just a couple of the highlights that I think about every night. And now I can add, oh, it's got to be almost a cool mill. A cool mill.
I mean, you said 600K.
Yeah. And then I quickly bumped it up because I thought I'd way underestimated.
Well,
Underestimated.
listen, we all have those same things that haunt us. One time when I was a
Yeah.
kid, I tried to stand up to some bullies
Oh
and
no.
I was shaking inside because it was
Hmm.
like, I can't believe I'm actually doing this. And I don't remember the full speech I gave them, but I said something about like, you guys think you're so cool, but reality check, you're not. And when I said reality check, because my heart was racing, I went to put my finger onto the side of my temple on my forehead to go like reality check, you're not. But in the chaos of the moment, I
Hmm.
accidentally put my finger in my own ear. And, and let's just say, unfortunately, instead of me seeming powerful or
Yep.
brave
Yep.
or like I really like gave it to them, I just
Hmm.
gave them so much new fodder to bully me about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, oh God, I thought you were going to say you poked yourself in the eye.
No,
Somehow the ear might be worse.
I think it's weird. I think it's
Oh,
worse.
oh God. I mean, there's just like, again, why are we built this way to like think of these things and be like, well, we're going to remember that until the end of time. And yet there's something that it's like, I need to remember this. Like, I
Yeah.
genuinely need to remember this. And it just poof out your
Well,
brain.
I think that there is a lot of studies that have been done about like, trauma.
Oh, sure. Sure. Like, I, I think it happened in a recent one, but in an unboxing I was doing where I pulled out a certain color of like durables. And I was like, cool, I know that this bag color means this series. And I'm like, easy, I'm going to remember that. And in that same video, I went, what color is that bag? What series does that go with? In the same video, I went from, I'll remember that to, I have no clue what series that is. And that's just genuine. But yet, I remember thinking it would be cool at the age of like 7 to, on a dare, eat grass at the park across the street that had just been fucking sprayed for something awful. Great news, I puked purple. And that was something I didn't expect. And great
And
news, that boy didn't think I was cool at all.
and great news, purple ironically was also the color of the bag from the Doorables.
Oh, see, that's how I would have remembered it. If it
Yep.
was, I would have been like, huh, I remember that shade. Anyhow, yeah, alarming.
Listen, we're doing the best we
Alarming.
can. We're doing the best we
Yeah.
can.
Well,
Speaking of the best we can, let's get into this episode, which I cannot wait for.
oh boy.
But
Yeah.
before we do, what you drinking over there?
Oh, I'm halfway through a Slurpee at this point.
Beauty. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
got a glass of white wine
Oof.
and a water and a water. But listen, Christy sent me a message earlier about this. Um, this is, of course, the episode this week is the Bennington Triangle.
Mhm.
And I'm going to assume, okay, I never read the synopses ahead of time. I'm going to
Of
assume that
course.
she addresses it in the synopsis. So I'm going to read it. And then if you don't, then we can talk about it after. Here we go.
Of course.
Why did I ever doubt it for even a split second? Today's episode is a little different from our usual subject matter. While it does contain murder and mysterious disappearances, it also involves our theories becoming a little more batshit than normal. So buckle up for our deep dive on the Bennington Triangle, an area in Vermont that is known for a series of murders and disappearances that remain unsolved to this day. Is there an unknown serial killer working in the area? Or is the culprit a wild bear or mountain lion? Or could the real answer involve something supernatural like Bigfoot, alien abductions, or even a curse dating back centuries? Christy Oxborrow investigates.
Here's the thing. In my haste, to try and, because I gave myself the goal, which is nobody needed the goal. I didn't need it, but I put the goal on myself that I wanted to try and do cases from as many places as possible. And I with the United States, there's an end game. Like you can see the end in sight. Like there's only so many states. So I'm like, that's doable. And so every once in a while I Google like popular true crime unsolved cases or whatever with that state. And this kept coming up for Vermont. And I was like, I don't know what it is. I should click into it, look at see. And it was like disappearances. I'm like, okay, this will be great. And then I locked it in. And then I started to research it. And I went, what have I done? What is this? And the answer is, I don't know.
I can't wait.
I don't know what this is. Because for the first time in, oh God, ages, there's no disclaimer on
Ah,
this episode. I guess we'll call this me shaking things up. I don't, this is as much as I shake things up in my 40s. It's dangerous to shake things up otherwise.
I love it.
But am I going to regret this later? Maybe. It's too late. We're here. The moment I went, what am I doing? I was like, we've got to record. So
Yeah.
we're just pushing ahead. So I guess the real disclaimer is I might go off the rails, and I know that I often do, but this is the first time I'm actually going to give you a heads up, which means it's going to go so much further than what you think it will.
I cannot wait.
Oh boy, this is going to go so many places that you never see coming. So, as millennials, we grew up thinking the biggest threats to our adult lives were going to be quicksand and the Bermuda Triangle. It was a different time. But the Bermuda Triangle is an area in the Atlantic Ocean which sits roughly between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. Legend has it that more than 50 ships and 20 airplanes have mysteriously disappeared in that area. Some ships were found abandoned for no apparent reason, while others simply vanished without transmitting any sort of distress call. And while many theories have been made, including everything from rogue waves to human error to supernatural causes. No single answer has ever been determined. Something I never thought I'd say on this show. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, there is no evidence that mysterious disappearances occur with any greater frequency in the Bermuda Triangle than in any other large, well traveled area of the ocean. And yet,
Huh.
in our millennial hearts, we still believe the Bermuda Triangle is something to be feared. Is there something darker at work here? We don't know. I mean, the terrifying thing is there are multiple places like the Bermuda Triangle across the world that I've never heard of. So, great news. New anxieties unlocked. There's Broadhaven Triangle in the UK, which is said to be the prime spot for UFO activity. There's Lake Michigan Triangle in the Great Lakes region, which has had a series of unexplained disappearances, shipwrecks, plane crashes, and UFO sightings. There's Bridgewater Triangle in southeastern Massachusetts, which is known for UFOs, poltergeists, shadow people, and creatures like Bigfoot, giant snakes, and something called thunderbirds, which are apparently pterodactyl like creatures with 12-foot wingspans that I didn't think was a thing. They're not a thing, but some people think they're a thing. And I'm terrified that I didn't know or had any sort of prepare. Like I wasn't prepared for uh, thunderbirds existing. They don't. But if they did, I wouldn't have been prepared.
Right.
But for all of this, I say no, thank you. Um, I'm gonna stick with the far more pleasant Thunder Cats. Thank you very much, Christy. What the fuck? this, this is who makes an '80s cartoon reference in this moment. Well,
Yeah.
it's too late now. Oh, okay. So there's also Magnetic Island or Maggie Island in Australia. It's known for over 20 shipwrecks, Loch Ness monster sightings, which I've never heard of in other locations, and even human skeletons washing ashore as recently as 2021. In 2011, bones that washed ashore were found to be over 150 years old. And there's the Alaska Triangle, which has seen numerous plane disappearances, including when a U.S. congressman's plane disappeared in that area in 1972. Not crashed, just disappeared. Neither the men on the plane nor the plane's wreckage have ever been found. In 1950, a military aircraft carrying 36 passengers and 8 crew also disappeared while flying through that area. And if that wasn't crazy enough, more than 20,000 people have gone missing in that region since the 1970s. An average of 2,250 people go missing in that area every year, which is twice the national average. Some people blame the vast wilderness, others blame unusual magnetic activity, and some just outright say it's aliens. Again, these are just a few examples of the many mysterious triangles. Why are they always triangles? I can't think about it. But that exist in the world. But today we are focusing on one in particular. The Bennington Triangle is a 300 square mile area in southwestern Vermont. The exact parameters are uncertain, but it is said to include Glastonbury Mountain and the surrounding towns of Bennington, Shaftesbury, Somerset, and Woodford. The name Bennington Triangle was first coined in 1992 on a radio broadcast by American author Joseph Citro, who is known for researching hauntings, ghost stories, folklore, and paranormal occurrences in the New England area. While researching Vermont, Joseph noticed that there were 5 people who went missing between 1945 and 1950, in the like exact same area. Also, that area was known for strange occurrences like, UFO sightings and mysterious creatures. The town at the heart of that area was Glastonbury, a once small logging community which has long since been abandoned. The town was chartered in 1761 and found brief success in the logging industry until they literally ran out of trees. In 1897, the townspeople tried to turn Glastonbury into a resort, complete with massive hotel, casino, and a trolley that would bring visitors from nearby towns. Unfortunately, the following year, a massive flood wiped out the town, and most of the residents were forced to move elsewhere. Glastonbury was officially unincorporated in 1937, meaning it became a ghost town.
Ah,
As of 2023, the town's population was 7, which I'll be
wow.
honest, more than I expected. And while this might be enough to leave the area in obscurity, an unusual number of strange occurrences in the area has kept Glastonbury and its surrounding mountain in the public eye. Over the years, there have been many claims of strange lights, unusual odors, sightings of Bigfoot like creatures, and even UFOs. Many claim to have seen glowing orbs and floating triangular and disc shaped objects moving silently through the air or hovering above the trees before quickly vanishing. 2 teenagers at a summer camp had an experience in the summer of 1968. While at Buff Ledge Camp, which is about 130 miles north of Glastonbury, 16-year-old Michael Lapp and 19-year-old camp counselor Janet Cornell both claimed to have seen 3 small craft emerge from a floating cigar shaped object. Both teens claimed to have experienced telepathic communication with 2 figures inside the larger craft. The figures stated that they were only on Earth to find a new form of energy and that they weren't going to harm anyone. And UFOs weren't the only unusual sky activity. According to Medium.com, several plane crashes occurred in the area between 1944 and 1973. The most notable included the crash of a B 24 Liberator bomber in 1944, the crash of a 2 engine aircraft in 1969, and the crash of a Cessna in 1973. But strange sightings and accidents weren't the only things happening in Glastonbury. There were also 2 murders.
Oh my God.
On April 4th, 1892, mill worker Henry McDowell had a drunken confrontation with his co-worker, John Crowley. It is not known what the argument was about, but McDowell responded by bludgeoning John to death with a rock. McDowell quickly fled the scene and was eventually caught in Connecticut, where he fully confessed to the crime. McDowell told police that there were voices in his head that wouldn't leave him alone. McDowell was convicted of John Crowley's murder and sentenced to life at a local asylum. Months later, McDowell managed to escape and was last seen on a train headed back to Bennington, Vermont. McDowell was never seen or heard from again.
No.
The second murder in the area occurred September 30th, 1897. John Harper and his brother were out hunting in the woods just south of Glastonbury when they got separated. His brother heard a gunshot followed by John screaming. However, despite the sounds, his brother was unable to find him. The following day, John was found sitting under a tree with his gun propped up beside him. He was miles away from where he had been hunting with his brother. John died from a single gunshot wound. No suspect was ever identified.
Hmm.
And if this isn't all enough, It's been reported that as many as 40 people have disappeared from the area, including 3 experienced hunters who disappeared in 1949, a 13-year-old boy named Melvin Hills who disappeared near the woods in October 1942, and a 16-year-old girl named Martha Jones who went missing in the area in November 1950. Martha was last seen hitchhiking to her boarding school. Sadly, Martha's parents believed she was at school, and the school, for whatever reason, believed that Martha was at home with her parents. So no one realized she was missing for a month.
Oh my God.
As of this record, she's never been found.
Jeez.
As for the remaining disappearances, unfortunately, there is no public information about most of them. So we're going to focus on the 5, which actually did get press. I don't know why these specific got press and the others didn't, but I'm working with what I have. These 5 disappearances occurred between 1945 and 1950. So on November 12th, 1945, 74-year-old Mitty Rivers, an avid hunter and outdoorsman who spent his entire life in the area, took a group out hunting for the weekend. The group included 3 people plus Mitty's son-in-law, Joe. The group got to a fork in the path. And for whatever reason, Mitty suggested that he was going to go one way and the rest of the group would go the other way. And Mitty said he'd meet them back at camp for lunch. But when Mitty hadn't returned by 4 p.m., the group got concerned. While they knew Mitty was more than capable of traversing the woods, they decided to leave camp and try to find him on their own in case something had gone wrong. But after a few hours, they found nothing, so they hiked nearly 5 miles to Bennington, where they asked the local fire chief to help search for Mitty. A search party was organized, including soldiers from a nearby army base and about 300 local volunteers. They spent 8 days going through the woods looking for Mitty. But in the end, the only sign of Mitty was a single rifle cartridge found in a stream. They believe that the cartridge matched the style of gun that Mitty was last seen carrying. So the theory at the time was that Mitty bent over and the cartridge fell out of his pocket. So did he bend over to get water from the stream, maybe? Or was he possibly tracking something? As of this record, Mitty Rivers has never been found.
Hmm.
The second and easily most well-known of the disappearances was 18-year-old college sophomore Paula Jean Weldon. On December 1st, 1946, Paula decided to hike on Long Trail, which is a 272-mile-long trail that runs the full length of Vermont, all the way from the Massachusetts border in the south to the Canadian border in the north. An experienced hiker could walk the full trail in 15 to 30 days, depending on how many miles a day they did. But most people just did like a small section and then turned around and went home. Multiple people reported seeing Paula in a red parka. An older couple who was walking about 100 yards behind her said they saw her turn a corner, but when they got to that same corner, Paula was just gone. When Paula didn't return to her dorm that night, people grew concerned. Students gathered to search for her. They were joined by the sheriff's department and later the National Guard and the FBI. An estimated 1,000 people helped in the search, which also included aircrafts flying over the search area. There were rumors that Paula had run away to Canada to be with her boyfriend, while others suggested that she just purposely chose to run off and live in the mountains. Now, do college students often randomly decide to run off and live in the woods? I doubt it. Not to mention, she brought absolutely no supplies with her, and she didn't have the proper footwear for hiking, let alone for living in the woods. And if there was a boyfriend, he never came forward. So I just don't think I buy either of those scenarios. A man named Lewis Knapp came forward to say he had given Paula a ride earlier that day. He found her hitchhiking while he was on his way home to Bennington. He offered her a ride closer to the trail entrance. Paula was seen 45 minutes later by multiple people walking the trail. Paula even stopped to speak to one man, asking him how far you can go on the trail. The man told Paula she might not be wearing enough clothing for the weather because it was about 50 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees Celsius at the time. A $5,000 reward was offered for information in Paula's case, but the authorities did not get anything concrete. A woman named Aura, who worked as a waitress in Fall River, Massachusetts, claimed that she saw a man who was accompanied by a girl matching Paula's description. Aura claims the man, who she guessed was maybe in his mid-20s, she said he was angry and inebriated. And when the man got up to pay the bill, the girl he was with asked Aura how far she was from Bennington, Vermont. Aura gave the girl directions to the nearest bus depot. Bennington is like 182 miles northwest of Fall River. Aura was adamant that the girl was Paula because she had seen Paula's picture in the newspaper. But when police searched Fall River, they found nothing to suggest that Paula had ever been there. Police also spoke to a man who owned a cabin in the area where Paula went missing. The man said that around noon on that same day, 3 men showed up at his door and asked him to hold on to a suitcase for them. He had never met these men in his life. Inside the suitcase were just a bunch of clothes that were labeled with 3 different names: William Watts, M. Golder, and J.W. Carroll. The men had mentioned that they were in the military, but they didn't say why they were in the area or why they needed to leave their suitcase with a stranger. And then the weirdest part of all, the men never returned for the suitcase. So I don't know if those men maybe went missing, like so many other people in the area, or if they just simply didn't bother to go back for it. Did these 3 men have something to do with Paula's disappearance? I mean, it's possible, but if so, why would you leave your names behind? But then if the men aren't connected to Paula, what the hell were they doing? Why would they leave their clothes behind? And why would they choose to randomly leave their clothes with a stranger to begin with? It's just, none of this all makes sense. But
Yeah.
despite the authorities participating in the search, Paula's father, Archibald Weldon, criticized how the authorities handled the situation, calling their search techniques primitive. His negative comments were the catalyst that led to the formation of the Vermont State Police just 7 months later.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then on December 1st, 1949, exactly to the day 3 years after Paula Weldon went missing, another person went missing in the area. 68-year-old Army veteran James Tedford was returning from visiting family. He was last seen getting on a bus headed to Bennington. But when the bus arrived in town, James was nowhere to be found. His belongings were found on the bus, and his seat had an open bus schedule on it. There were only 14 passengers on that trip, and the other passengers confirmed that James was on the bus when they arrived at the stop before Bennington. And while some may be quick to suggest that maybe James got off the bus at the stop and then simply missed getting back on the bus before it left, no one remembered seeing him leave the bus at all. And while he was last seen on December 1st, somehow his disappearance wasn't reported until a week later. And I mean, as of this record, James Tedford has not been seen or heard from since. And then the following year, on October 12th, 8-year-old Paul Jepson disappeared from his family's vehicle. Paul's mother had gone to the Bennington dump to tend to some hogs that she was caring for. She felt she wasn't going to be long, so she told Paul to stay in the truck and play with his toys. An hour later, when Paul's mother returned to the vehicle, Paul was gone. He was wearing a bright red jacket, just like Paula, which is interesting. Um, so, wearing bright red, he would have been easy to spot amongst the snow, but his mother couldn't find him anywhere. A massive search took place, including the sheriff's bloodhound, who was able to track Paul's scent to a nearby highway, specifically the crossroads at Route 7, where the scent stopped, right near the spot where Paula Weldon was last seen 4 years prior. But just like Paula, there was no sign of Paul. The fact that his trail abruptly ended at a highway could mean he was picked up by a passing vehicle. Local rumors claimed that Paul's parents killed their son and then fed his body to the hogs, which is horrific to think about. I will point out there's no evidence that Paul's parents were involved, but we've seen enough shady true crime to know that even the horrific theories turn out to be true every once in a while. In this case, with absolutely nothing to base it on, I just don't believe the parents were involved. Maybe I'm just trying to believe the best in people. I don't know. But just 16 days after Paul disappeared, 53-year-old Frida Langer and her cousin Herbert Elsner were camping near the Somerset Reservoir. They went for a hike, and about half a mile into their trek, Frida fell into a stream. So she decided she was going to head back to camp and change her clothes. So she told her cousin she would catch up with him. But when he saw no signs of Frida, Herbert heads back to the campsite. But Frida wasn't there. Frida's husband, who was at the campsite the entire time, resting an injured knee, he hadn't seen her since Frida first left with Herbert ages before. 5 separate extensive searches took place over the next 2 weeks, including helicopters, airplanes, and about 400 local volunteers. But there was no sign of Frida, who was described as an experienced hiker. About 7 months later, in May 1951, Frida's body was found 3.5 miles from her campsite. She was found in an open area which had been extensively searched multiple times months before she was found. Due to the condition of the remains, no cause of death could be determined. It has been suggested that Frida simply got lost on her way back to camp and headed in the wrong direction, but she was an experienced hiker and survivalist, so it doesn't seem likely that she'd get so far off course. And while I'm not accusing anyone of anything, I'm simply speculating, is it possible that either the husband or the cousin were involved and they put the body somewhere that they hoped people would never find it? I mean, I don't know enough of their stories, so I couldn't even begin to tell you what a motive could be. But also, how was her body not found when they searched that area multiple times? As of this record, out of the disappearances in the Bennington Triangle, Frida Langer is the only person who has ever been found. So here we go. We're going to look at some theories as to what could have happened here. We're going to start with a not so obvious choice, but since 5 people went missing from a similar place at a similar time of year, and most went missing between 3 and 4 p.m., one might think maybe a serial killer is to blame. While the ages and genders of the victims varied, the time, dates, and locations could be enough to establish some sort of pattern. Since, or some have suggested that Henry McDowell could be the culprit. I mentioned McDowell earlier. He was the guy who bludgeoned a man in 1892, went to an asylum, and escaped. And I get it, but this would mean that McDowell would have to survive alone in the woods for decades before the first known disappearance in 1942. I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's just very unlikely, given that by then he'd probably be in his 70s or 80s. Is it possible that McDowell was hiding in the woods and maybe was responsible for the murder of John Harbour in 1897? Maybe. I mean, he would have had to survive 5 years alone in the woods for that to be a thing. Um, but I think that's more possible than the idea that he was responsible for the disappearances that started 50 years after he escaped.
Right.
Overall, do I think that a serial killer is to blame here? I don't. Um, so next on the list, they're only gonna get weirder from here, folks. So, next on the list, I mean, is it possible that these people, expert or not, simply got lost? The forest in that area is dense and impenetrable, which could easily confuse someone and send them unknowingly walking in the wrong direction. It's also possible that they maybe lost their footing, maybe they fell off some sort of precarious spot, maybe the weather was a factor in driving them like really deep into the woods to the point they couldn't find their way out. I mean, the question then becomes if they simply got pushed off the trail, how has no sign of them been found? I mean, we're talking no footprints, no piece of discarded clothing, nothing. How could an experienced outdoors person get so lost that they wouldn't be found? Is there something bigger at play in the Glastonbury Mountain area? Well, people have claimed to have encountered voices on dead air radio signals and unexplainable navigational mishaps while in the area. Not to mention the multiple plane crashes that I mentioned earlier. So, is there something about these woods that maybe can't be explained? In 2008, 27-year-old Robert Singley, a Bennington College student and experienced hiker, went for a hike on the Long Trail when he got lost. He said, quote, "Right before I lost the trail, everything crescendoed into this weird sort of dizzying confusion. It just suddenly got dark, and then it was like, where am I? What's going on? I was totally lost." Robert said he tried to seek shelter under a large tree, but it was, quote, expelling a weird, haunting energy.
Oh.
When Robert was found the following day, he was nearly 7 miles off course. Robert said that when he turned around to head back the way he came, the trail was suddenly completely foreign to him. Robert Singley is the only story here of a lost hiker who was found alive. And he was found by the Vermont State Police, the very organization that was created because of Paula Weldon's disappearance. So, how does an experienced hiker end up nearly 7 miles off course? Why was this particular area a hotbed of unusual occurrences? Well, the Abenaki, who are an indigenous group who lived in the Glastonbury region at the time of its development, they believed that the mountain was sacred but cursed.
Oh.
They would only step foot on the mountain to bury their dead, as they believed that the top of the mountain was where the four winds met in some sort of eternal struggle. Could this somehow explain the weird vibe that possibly threw off the hikers and led them astray? Maybe it caused other strange things in the area. There is a story that one January in like the 1930s, a traveler saw a group of mountaineers practicing human hibernation, which is just as it sounds. The traveler described seeing two women and four men being drugged, stripped naked, and left outside to freeze. When the six people no longer had vital signs, they were placed in wooden boxes, which were nailed shut and then buried in the snow. The traveler rightfully panicked, but the people told him that if he returned in the spring, he would find those six people had reawakened. So the traveler returned to the area in May of that year, and he claimed to have seen all 6 of those people alive and well. So, how much do we actually believe this? I find it hard to believe that a random stranger remembered the exact faces of 6 people he'd only seen briefly 4 months earlier. Just as I find it hard to believe that human hibernation is a thing, because it's not. I just don't believe humans are capable of hibernation. And according to healthline.com, quote, there is no evidence that humans can go into hibernation. So, is it just some sort of folk story based on a sliver of truth that over decades has evolved into an unbelievable tale? Or did the traveler witness multiple murders? And this was just a poor attempt at covering it up? Or is this just a really, really weird way of describing the strange energy that occurs in that area? In the land of like running with this strange energy, in the days leading up to the disappearance of 8-year-old Paul Jepson in October 1950, Paul's father claims that his son spoke about the lure of the mountains. He said his son talked about nothing else for days. So was it a weird vibe that lured Paul? Is that what we're talking about? Or was his father lying to cover up a crime? Again, only speculating. But then there's the theory that maybe these lost hikers were all attacked by a wild animal, like a bear or some sort of mountain cat. Well, the area was known for cougars, bobcats, and lynx, but a cougar hadn't been seen in that area since 1881. And according to the internet, bobcats and lynx aren't typically aggressive towards people. In fact, a lynx is more likely to outright avoid people altogether. There are bears, of course, specifically black bears in Vermont. But if these hikers were attacked by a bear or even a mountain cat, wouldn't searchers have found blood or animal tracks or torn clothing or signs of a struggle or signs that someone was dragged off in some way? Also, these people all went missing between October and December. And typically, bears hibernate from October to April. So, does this mean that an animal attack is off the table as far as theories go? I mean, I, I feel at this point, until we know the truth, we can't rule anything out. But in November 1943, 37-year-old Carl Herrick went on a hunting trip with his cousin Henry, about 10 miles northeast of Glastonbury. The 2 men got separated, and when Henry returned to camp that night, he discovered Carl was not there. Henry contacted the authorities, who helped organize multiple search parties to look for Carl. 3 days later, Carl's mutilated body was found surrounded by large, mysterious footprints. Carl's rifle was propped up on a tree about 70 feet away from his body. It had not been fired. The autopsy determined that Carl's ribs punctured his lungs, meaning he was squeezed to death.
Okay.
Is it possible the footprints were actually bear tracks and his lungs weren't squeezed, but rather, and I know it sounds silly, but a bear sat on him? I just feel the weight of a bear on your chest could easily cause your ribs to puncture your lungs. And yes, by the time Carl was killed, bears in that area likely would have been hibernating. But I'm just trying to focus on any potential logical theory here before I go off the rails with, the more non-traditional uh, theories. Like, if it wasn't a bear, is it possible that another creature was involved? Perhaps something a little more supernatural.
Now we're getting somewhere. Now we're getting into it.
Am I really about to suggest Bigfoot? Yeah. Uh, do I believe it was Bigfoot? Not so much. But I'm trying to give as many theories as possible here, so we're just all in it now, folks. So I'm gonna say something that I never thought I would say on this show. Bigfoot, also known as Sasquatch, is a large, hairy, human like creature that lives in densely forested areas. Is it real? Some people believe so, even though there hasn't been any definitive evidence. But if you're curious about a visual, I recommend the 1987 comedy Harry and the Hendersons, if nothing else than for American treasure John Lithgow. But since Vermont is heavily covered in forest, there should be no surprise that the state has a long history of Bigfoot sightings. Google tells me Vermont is 78% forest, which makes it the fourth most forested state in the lower 48 states. The top three, and thank you for asking, are West Virginia with 79%, New Hampshire with 84%, and coming in at the top with the most forest per area, Maine with an incredible 89%. The first recorded sighting of Bigfoot in Vermont was in 1879 when a group of hunters claimed to have seen an enormous, hairy creature lurking in the woods. The most recent sighting was in September 2003 when a man claimed to have seen Bigfoot near Route 7, which is the spot where Paul Jepson and Paula Weldon disappeared. Officials claimed, well, what that man saw was likely just an upright black bear, and not to be a conspiracy type, but that's what they'd have to say, isn't it?
Yeah.
Of course, a cop is going to be like, it was a bear. They stand up. You know that. Of course, like, stop it, sir.
Come on.
I mean,
Come on. You keep coming over here. Keep coming over to the dark
oh,
side.
by the end of by the end of this, I'll be completely on the dark side. I'll tell you
I'm
that.
so happy.
God. Now, there, of course, has never been concrete evidence that Bigfoot exists. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't. And that's as close as you're going to get to me saying he may or may not exist. As you know, I am naturally a skeptic. So even bringing this as a potential theory is a big deal. But in the Bennington area, there is a legend of a Bigfoot like creature that is referred to as the Bennington Monster. The sightings date back to the early 19th century when a group of stagecoach passengers described seeing a towering, hairy, barefoot creature which walked upright and was roughly 8 feet tall and had thick black hair. The witnesses claimed the creature was strong enough to tip over a carriage by punching its side. It should be noted that this sighting occurred at night and during a storm, so it's tough to say what those people saw, but according to the stagecoach driver, he saw a large set of footprints in the mud. The people inside the coach decided to come out and see the footprints for themselves, and out of nowhere, something hit the coach with a tremendous force. The remaining passengers quickly scurry out, and whatever was hitting the coach hit it again so hard that it knocked the coach over on its side. The passengers described seeing a massive human shape covered in thick dark fur with glowing eyes. They said the creature roared loudly before running into the woods. Bigfoot and the Bennington Monster seem to have a lot of similarities to a third uh, entity, anomaly. I don't know what we're calling them at this point, um, as what is called the wild man. So basically, these wild men are incredibly large, hairy creatures that supposedly roamed the woods. But unlike Bigfoot, the wild man is covered in red hair. And as a ginger, I can't tell if I'm immediately offended by this or if I'm honored just to have some sort of representation. It could honestly go either way at this point. But in 1879, two hunters reported seeing a wild man in the woods near Pownell, Pownell, which is about 6.5 miles south of Bennington. The hunters said the creature jumped at them, so they shot at it. The creature then screamed, charged at the hunters, causing them to drop their weapons and run. And then they never saw the creature again. And while we're on the topic of paranormal creatures, I have to mention, I don't have to, um, the man-eating stone. Yeah, you you heard me correctly. Um, Author Joseph Citro, who first coined the phrase Bennington Triangle, published a book called The Vermont Monster Guide. In the book, Joseph mentioned a man-eating stone that the Abenaki people believed lived on Glastonbury Mountain. The Abenaki were the indigenous people who lived in the area long before it was incorporated and believed the area was cursed. There are no specific descriptions of this stone, but according to folklore, the Abenaki believed that the stone is large enough that if a human were to step on it, the stone then becomes malleable and essentially swallows the human whole. And yeah, I hear myself. This is easily the most batshit thing I've ever brought to the table. I'm not outright saying an enchanted stone is responsible for all these disappearances. I'm just telling you a local legend and giving you the space to make your own theories. That's what I'm doing. I don't know if it's connected to this man-eating stone or not, but the Abenaki also believed in a spirit known as the Stone Man or the Glastonbury Giant, uh, who was said to bring misfortune to those who entered the spirit's domain. And if we're going to this level, why not bring aliens into it?
Yeah, baby.
Is it possible that the weird, disorienting feeling that Robert Singley felt in the woods happened to the other people who disappeared? Does the weird feeling mean aliens were calling people to a specific spot? Am I mentioning aliens for the first time since our alien episode back in 2020? I am. Was that episode exactly 190 episodes ago? It was. I think I've lost all sense of reality at this point. But as a natural skeptic, let me add, if it was aliens, why did the disappearances stop? Why did they occur almost yearly for 6 years straight and then just nothing for 70 years? And why was only one of the five bodies found? What really happened in the Bennington Triangle? Going back um, to the sort of thing that you would expect from me, there could be a perfectly logical explanation for each of these disappearances. Maybe Paul Jepson and Paula Weldon, who were last seen in the same spot, maybe they were both abducted by a passing motorist on the highway. And maybe Frida Langer and Mitty Rivers somehow became disoriented and fell. And maybe James Tedford simply got off the bus without anyone noticing. He had just gone to visit family and he was heading back to the Vermont soldiers' home. And maybe he just did not want to go back. I mean, that of course does not explain why he never contacted his family again. The fact that all five victims went missing in the last 3 months of the year, most between 3 and 4 p.m., and some even on the exact same date, but years apart, feels like an eerie coincidence, just like how Paul and Paula, similar names, were both last seen wearing bright red jackets. And while my logical side says, well, that's a strange coincidence, the other side of my brain goes, well, it's too much of a coincidence to be a coincidence. It's crazy making. And even if we were to find their remains now, we'd never be able to know how they got where they ended up. Not to mention, who shot John Harbour back in 1897? The entire thing brings up so many questions, but gives so few answers. So, reporting for this strange and unusual episode, to quote Lydia Dietz, I myself am strange and unusual.
I need you to know that I am on fire. I
Oh,
am
sure.
jazzed. This is a gift in my life. So listen, let's take a
Yeah.
quick break, hit the can, grab another drink, and we'll be back. And you don't want to miss this because I'm a pig in shit right now on the Bennington Triangle episode of True Crime and Cocktails. Clap two on three. One, two, three. Welcome back to this episode of True Crime and Cocktails. We're, of course, discussing the Bennington Triangle, and Scully over there actually had to get on board with some rather out of the box theories, which could not make Mulder over here happier. Now, I'm going to jump around, I'm going to bounce around because I'm buzzing. I'm so excited about this. Now, here's what I think is interesting.
Yeah.
You brought up at the beginning about how, as millennials, we grew up fearing quicksand and the Bermuda Triangle. First of
Yes.
all, brilliant. How clever. Then later, you were talking about the man-eating stone.
Yeah.
And I went, she doesn't even realize. She brought up quicksand. This could be what
Oh.
the Abenaki people, they're saying, I'm saying, is it possible that there was some form of quicksand, and they're referring to it in this kind of different, different way of looking at it, i.e., this creature is large enough that it can envelop and eat you. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, swallow people whole. What does that make me think of? Quicksand.
Quicksand.
Is it
Yeah.
possible for there to be quicksand in a forest?
Oh, I
Is
would
it
have to think so, right?
is it possible that there's some sort of forest quicksand in this area that
Sure.
is unique to that area,
I
right?
mean, it's possible. We grew up pretty much getting told by every TV show, like, that's the thing you're going to have to watch out for. Quicksand.
I've just Googled, and apparently it is possible for quicksand to exist in a forest, although not common, as long as the conditions are right, like a high water table, a source of flowing water, and loose saturated sand.
Interesting.
I'm just saying.
I mean, beautiful connection there. I also have to walk it back by saying I was really hard on myself at the beginning of this episode where I was like, I don't know. I'm a kook. And then when we went on that break, I was like, that actually wasn't so
No, I thought
So I
I was
really
like,
need to dial it back and not be so harsh on
yeah, I
myself.
didn't think this was crazy at all.
But you're damn right.
Yeah. Anyway, that's the first thing I bring up. Um, all right, hold on. Where's my note? Where am I here? Okay. Um, and then the other theory. Well, listen, I'll save it. I'll save it. Let me go through the other things, and then I'll get to my theory. Okay.
Oh, I can't wait.
Um, where am I? Where am I? Where am I? Okay. The 2008, the college student that got lost
Yeah,
said that a tree was expelling weird energy. He was found 7 miles off course. Okay. This is interesting to me, obviously, because it feels like there's so many things that this could potentially be. Like you were
sure.
saying, could be aliens, could be something paranormal, could be, you know, God knows what else, right? It's interesting to me because he was found. So
Yeah,
then it's like, if we are to believe this is some sort of paranormal situation or whatever, it's like, why was he chosen to survive and tell the story?
sure.
Is there something about the amount of time? Is there something about, you know, I don't know. Um, I also think it's interesting that Paula went missing in the exact same place that Paul went missing,
I know, right? And both wearing red jackets.
both wearing red. That's something I feel like is worth noting.
And one was
Um,
8 and the other was 18.
yeah, something's up.
Yeah.
Um, okay, this is not on topic, but you said New Hampshire, and I think I've talked about this on the show before. Anytime someone says New Hampshire, I think New Hampshire? What about Bob? Um,
Amazing.
all right. I think that, listen, oh, also, you were talking about this area in Vermont with Glastonbury and Somerset. I'm like, where are we? England?
Oh, there's almost everything in like a tiny area right there. I think there's like a Londonderry
Mm,
and like all of those names. I think there's also a Manchester there. I could be wrong, but there's a lot of like British names in that spot. And it's like, there's this thing when you're naming towns, you can use anything. Like you don't just have to go with ones back home.
I guess they were feeling unoriginal.
I'm just upset it wasn't like they didn't add the number 2
Right.
after.
Right. Right.
That's the only downside.
Well, listen, those were my very, very short notes. Why? Because everything else I need to talk about is my theory. Now,
Horse.
quite often on this show, there are times where something will organically come up in the opener that then miraculously connects later in the episode. And we're always like, what are the
Sure.
chances of that? So, of course, the theory I bring to the table, timeline shifting.
Of course.
Now, listen, do I think it's possible there could be all of these other paranormal situations? Like by the way, the Abenaki people are like, you don't go up there because it's cursed. You know what I'm going to say? I'm not going up
Great.
there.
Thank you for letting me know. Excuse me while I leave the area.
Thank you so much for letting me know. Want to respect everything you all believe in. Peace. I'm going to sneak. Like
Yep.
that's a
Yep.
no-brainer for me. Do I think that is there a belief that I have that that could be possible? Absolutely. I guess for me, part of this that is interesting is again the lack of bodies. That it's like it's one
Yeah.
thing if people were like showing up dead unexplained, but that's why again the first thing that came to mind was the quicksand because again it's like is it possible there's some weird nature phenomenon, right? And
Yeah.
if if there's any X-Files fans here, we all know that there's many times on that show where Mulder's like it's got to be this paranormal situation and then it's like a weird nature thing or something. That has
Oh,
happened,
sure.
right? But then the other part that comes up to me, the man who wasn't seen getting off the bus, the fact that two people went missing in the almost exact same area, this, amount of time. It was like exactly 10 years apart or whatever, right? And then they were 10 years apart in age, Paul and Paula, like that just makes me go, is there a rip in the space-time continuum there? Which which
Sure. Sure.
is that part of this creepy feeling that this guy felt, coming out of that tree? Is it that he got close to it but didn't go all the way? Is it that he skirted around it unknowingly? And then I know what you're thinking. Well, Lauren, is this rip in the space-time continuum the same as timeline shifting? And the answer is I don't think so. And the other answer is I don't know.
Sure.
How would I know? I'm not Neil deGrasse Tyson. We've already made this clear.
I couldn't be happier that you've said the words space-time continuum.
You and me both, baby.
I mean, there
You and me both.
I mean, we're all in agreement there's something weird. And
There's something
also,
strange in the neighborhood.
right? Thank you so much. The fact that the one guy who came out of it and was able to actually be like, I was there, I was lost, these things. Who's to say the people who didn't come back, who's to say they didn't feel the exact same thing?
Right. Oh, absolutely. And then of course, the other possibility that I'm, towing around here is that did they come out in another timeline?
Sure.
Right? That is it possible that these people are alive and well in this other timeline. Now, I know what I'm also hearing is like, then why was it only such a specific period of time?
Sure.
That's a great question. And by the way, I don't have an answer for that, but I don't understand how any of this works. And like,
Sure.
is it something that goes in cycles? Is that possible? Is it something that there was like time travel going on to a specific period of time?
Sure.
I don't know. I mean, the other thing I wanted to say about the aliens, again, I'm jumping all over the place here because I'm overstimulated. The other thing I wanted to say about the aliens, because you were like, why, if it was aliens, why would the disappearances stop?
Yeah.
Um, and you know, I had a couple theories on that. Is it possible that this alien race elected a new leader that stopped the space race? Is it possible that they went too far? That they were like, you're being found out down on Earth. They started to put harsher restrictions on. Is it
Oh,
possible
sure.
that as time went on, their technology got better, that they became more stealth, that they became less overt? Is it possible that they stopped messing with humans altogether? I think there's a lot that we don't know about the potential alien situation, you know?
Of course.
And it's like we can't keep going to that one area because we're again, we're drawing attention to ourselves.
I mean, the idea of being like, hey, they're starting to put some things together. And if they notice, then we're like, we can't let the, like, it's the first rule of aliens is you don't talk about aliens, right? Like,
Right.
they can't know about us. And so, yeah, I could see them being like, okay, we're going to have to choose somewhere else. Is there somewhere else on the planet where that space was 1945 to 1950? Is there somewhere else where in 1951 it started up for the
Right.
next however many years?
Right. Exactly. Somewhere else in the world.
One of these
Somewhere
other triangles, for example.
right. I mean, yeah, I think again, you know, there's so much, I guess I also am thinking if we're going by what we know about aliens, like I also feel like a lot of what we would hear about with aliens, if you believe in alien abductions, is of course they would return the people, right? So there's also
Sure.
that it's like, did that become the switch? Was it like one day it was like, guys, we can't keep kidnapping these humans, like it's becoming noticeable, like you have to put them back?
Right.
Is that possible? Is that what it is?
Sure.
I the Bigfoot thing for me, much like the wild animal thing, I just think we would have found bodies. Like, are these Bigfoot or wild men, are they eating these bodies? Like, I mean, I guess then we wouldn't find them. I guess that's possible, but I don't know that there's ever been a theory of Bigfoot being a cannibal.
I just feel like any creature, whether we're talking Bigfoot, whether we're talking bear, whether we're talking wild man, I just think wherever the person was taken, you're going to know. Like, you're going to see the area and you're going to be like, there was a struggle here. There's obviously blood. You can see drag marks or something. Like, you're going to know.
Yeah.
And I just feel like I feel like there would be evidence if it was some sort of creature or even Bigfoot.
And to be clear, I know I just said cannibal, and that would suggest that a Bigfoot would eat a Bigfoot. But then I guess I'm suggesting that perhaps the Bigfoots, share human DNA, and I have nothing to base that on.
Look, this isn't the right podcast to talk about Bigfoot. We've already been on that one years ago.
That's true. That's
which
true.
which does make me think I can't believe I was looking for theories about something creepy happening in the woods and I did not seriously suggest the Fae at any point.
This is now we're getting somewhere.
Not like the hot Fae in the books. I'm talking like the terrifying Fae that take children.
Yeah, if people haven't listened, you can find an episode of the podcast Bigfoot Collectors Club that we guested on, I want to say in like 2020 or 2021.
It was we I think we recorded it like just before we actually put out an episode
I
ever.
think you're right.
So like
And
early October, yeah.
and Christy tells a very harrowing story about the Fae, which I will not spoil in case you want to go listen to it. Um, but because of that, I think we're onto something. That could be something too.
Yeah.
But then again, It's also like the ages, like I agree with I love that I haven't even touched on the potential of a serial killer because I agree with you. I'm just like I feel like the MO is off. Like it's like the ages are all different and
Sure. Well, I mean, and with
yeah.
the Fae, only one was a child.
Right. And the
And
Fae do
they
typically
seem to
take
be
children, I
they,
believe, right?
they seem to take children from my understanding, but very little understanding of the Fae. The non-romantasy character phase. Um but yeah, it's the fact that it was the ages are so wildly different. But and also what are we saying? That uh, typically a man, but could be not a man, but like we're saying that some sort of killer either lives near or just lives in and lurks in the woods and once a year snatches somebody with nobody else seeing it. I I just don't. I love that that's one of the more like logical things and I'm like, "No, I just don't buy that it's anything to do with a serial killer." Just like I don't buy it has anything to do with some sort of wild or paranormal creature. So then I'm like, oh God, what's left? Aliens? Is that where I'm at? Is that what's left for me here? Aliens? Quicksand? That was another option. Because to your point, what would the Abenaki? They wouldn't know quicksand because this was,
Right.
how many hundreds and thousands of years ago. That wouldn't be a thing yet. It's not like they're like, quick, let me get the Encyclopedia Britannica to figure out what this is. They're to them, they might be like, that rock is literally swallowing people.
Right.
And it's like, well, it could just be quicksand. I don't know what the sand and water table situation is in and around that mountain. But to your point, if they're if they're like, we will only go there to bury our dead, which then essentially makes it a burial ground.
Yeah.
No thanks.
No, thank you.
I'm out.
No, thank you.
But again, I can't believe, yeah, I mentioned quicksand and I never considered what's more quicksand. Well, a rock that swallows someone whole. It's like, oh, that would also explain why there's no body
Right.
and just no evidence that they went anywhere.
Right.
Wow.
I love that I was so excited about my timeline shifting theory, but now I feel
Yeah.
like I've posed a really logical and like plausible, grounded, realistic theory, which is
Sure.
a bit of a bummer for me, if I'm going to be honest. You know what I mean?
Sure. I mean, in your defense, I mean, uh, again, it's so tough to say with time shifting because we believe there's something.
Yeah.
So I'm not taking time shifting off the table. I'm willing to take off serial killer and Bigfoot. But somehow in this twisted episode, aliens and time shifting are still on the table. So there you have it. I mean, again, so are you saying that they're in another timeline, but then what happened to them in that timeline?
Right.
And then is the reason one of the bodies was found because she didn't quite make it through the time rift or whatever.
I have no idea. I I wonder if it was one of those things like, you know how you hear those wild stories where it's like someone has no memory, like they have amnesia? Like,
Sure.
is it possible that these people wander into this new timeline and they have no memory of like who they were or where they came from?
Oh, that's possible. I mean,
It's like when you hear those stories about like an entire plane, like you mentioned in this too, like an entire plane just disappears. It's like, how does that happen? Where does it go? It's a plane. Like it feels like that's impossible to have disappear. And I'm going, Is it showing up in another timeline?
I mean, again, Neil, if if you happen to be a fan of the show, um, we'd love your thoughts on time shifting.
NDT.
Yeah.
What do we got to do?
Yeah. Set up a lunch.
Yeah.
I'm not saying there has to be props, but I'd like it. That's putting a lot of pressure on him. There doesn't need to be props. If
No,
you
no, no.
need props, I would love to make them for you. I'd be honored.
But we'll put it in the budget.
Yeah.
We'll pay for lunch. We'll pay for any props.
Yeah. Oh, who are
Christy will
you
build
kidding?
them.
I'm gonna run to a dollar store to get what I need to make the props so they don't look like dollar store props.
I feel like he'd respect that. We've
He
derailed.
would.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is do I think the most plausible theory is quicksand, aliens, or timeline jumping? Yeah.
Again, and I mean, I know we've said this on the show before, but how do you just like disappear out of nowhere? And there's just not a single sign of you, like a shoe not left behind, something like,
Well, and this is also making me want to rule out aliens a little bit, which I can't believe I'm saying this. What, now I'm
wow,
becoming the Scully?
I
But
put them on the table and you're taking them off?
it just, you'll love this. It just doesn't typically fit their MO. Like,
Sure,
typically, right? Like,
sure.
I don't know that they've been taking people unless, again, like, no, I'm not even going to say that. I was going to say unless they're dropping people in another timeline, but then I'm like, does that exist? Is this what Tom DeLong was talking about? But it's like, I need to really dig deeper into that. But I fear digging deeper because then I'm going to become one of the full blown conspiracy people, you know?
Don't know if we have to worry too much about that because this was like the first time in 190 episodes that I dangled aliens in front of you and you went, I don't think so. So I feel like that's a pretty solid base in reality. Like
Here's
your
the other
feet are firmly planted in this dimension.
Thank you for seeing me.
Of course.
Also, it should also be noted. Now, this is a spoiler for The X-Files, which again is a series that's 30 years old. So if you don't want to hear
Sure.
it, skip ahead now. But spoiler for you,
Right, because I've seen a handful of episodes.
right.
Yeah.
Fox Mulder's entire reason d'etre, his reason to be, is he witnessed his sister get kidnapped when they were children by aliens,
Right.
get abducted. And
Yes.
so that's what caused him to become a believer and caused him to like get into the work that he does, etc. But what you learn over the course of the series is that it wasn't that she was being abducted by aliens. It's that she was being taken by government people to be involved in these like experiments and stuff like that, which is a whole other kettle of fish.
Sure.
Which is partially what's like so interesting about Mulder's journey, but I don't need to nerd out and get into that. But the point I bring up only is the only other thing we haven't explored is
Government.
cover up, conspiracy, something under
Oh,
that
sure.
umbrella.
Sure.
Because this was also at an interesting time, right? Like a lot of these were happening in the 40s, right? Like the 40s, 1945 to 50, right?
Yeah.
What else was going on at that time? Like, was this happening, to your point, was this happening in other areas as well? Was there some sort of, I don't know, I'll say it. Were they experimenting with time travel? Were they targeting people in certain rural areas that, whatever, to like put them through some sort of experimentation?
Oh, I would not put anything past the government at this point. Like you could tell
Who?
me that they went to a place and took people at random from a very specific location and then just sat back and waited to see how long it would take someone to like put it together that all of these people went missing from this spot to see like at what level could they have stopped and got away with it?
Mm.
Would I believe that? Of course I would. I'm a skeptic, but I would not put anything past people of that level.
And listen, we don't want to. We're not trying to be whistleblowers here.
We're
We're not.
not. We're
We're
not.
not.
Aliens. Let's put aliens back on the table.
Yep.
Unless that
Aliens are
upsets
back on the
someone.
table, just like that. Um, Listen, here's the one thing I know. I know that you were like, this is the most bad shit episode ever, et cetera, et cetera. Here's
Sure.
what I'm going to say. I think solid. I think fascinating, riveting. I mean, truly such a mystery. I'll say it. I think this was a 12 out of 10.
Well, I could shit in a bag and you'd be like, beautiful. What a gift in my life. Because I don't know why shit in a bag was the thing. It was just the point of I can do no wrong in your eyes, and it's beautiful.
Listen, it's just the truth, and we thank you for your work as always, because this has riveted me, and I know I'm missing things that I wanted to say because I just got too excited, and I'm sure that we'll bring them up on Patreon or in another episode because, listen, I don't think this is the end of me thinking and ruminating about the Bennington Triangle.
Of course. I mean, God, we love a mystery.
We do. It brings us to life.
It does.
You know what else brings us to life? You, dear listeners. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. If you haven't already, give us a follow on the socials on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at True Crime and Cocktails, on Twitter at Not Detectives. If you'd like some bonus content, go over to patreon.com/True Crime and Cocktails to learn more about our subscription-based service over there. And of course, the only place for official True Crime and Cocktails merch is truecrewmerch.com. Remember, the 2024 ornaments, they're selling like hotcakes. Never forget the little Spider-Man. What a joy. Check that out if you're interested. Christy, do you want to tell the people about next week's episode?
On the next True Crime and Cocktails, Anatomy of Lies.
Now, this was our November patrons poll pick. The people over there voted for a scandal to be covered on the main feed of the show. So again, if you're interested in learning more about that, one of the things we offer is polls, monthly polls to help choose one of the episodes we cover over here. And this is going to be one of those episodes. How exciting. Christy, do you want to say goodnight to the people?
Happy birthday, Brendan Fraser.
Yeah, good night, Polly Shore.